Right, welcome to the woods for the winter of 2024-25. This is the woodland where I cut coppice. And what I cut is derelict, 50-year-old stuff, which is what this is. Derelict coppice is older than overstood coppice. Overstood coppice is just out of rotation. So rotation for hazel is 7, maybe 8 years. Can be as little as 5 if you get excellent growth, but beyond that it tends to get too fat to be useful. So what I'm here to do today is to have another look and work out what I'm going to do this year, because it's late November. Some people have already got their Chrissy decks up, and it's past time I started cutting coppice, because I want to get it down this year by the end of January, beginning of February, before the ground flora comes in, because ground flora is pretty much at a low ebb this time of year. Bit of deer browsing. The whole of this area has been deer browsed, and deer browsed really heavily, even though the trees are too big for the deer to damage, so many people think. But basically they've come in and you can see a browse line this sort of height, where they've taken almost everything except for a few leaves. They're nibbling the ivy and they're nibbling natural generation, and they've got in a couple of times next door, which is where I cut last year. And this is the sort of regrowth you should get in a year, and that's my eye level. I'm 5'8", so that's about 5'4", and that's gone up beyond 6 foot, and it's had to go through the dead hedge. But you can see on the edge here, one of the myths is that deer won't walk through stuff that might entangle their feet, such as we have along here, which is why I left this line, so they couldn't at least get a run up to get over this hedge. But if you look on the edges, that is typical deer damage. Cut off like a pair of secateurs, and that's at least 1.2 metres, and they put their heads in here. They've eaten these off as well. So individually protecting stalls with brash does not work. This is all deer damage. This is gone wild raspberries, all been chewed, and this has all been chewed off. This was protected with inverted commas with brash. As I say, it does not work. You can see how short this is. If this was left as it is, it would never come back as coppice. In fact, leave it 2 years, maybe 3 years, that sort of browsing, and the stalls will probably die. Even in here, which is the dead end, this is deer damage. Deer browsing on the bramble. You see it? They're hungry. There's a lot of them. And this is what we cut last year, which had deer in on maybe 2 occasions. And the other issue you got here is shading, of which I'll do a separate video. Right, so that's 1 year's regrowth of hazel, and that's grown through this dead hedge. And over here we've got stalls that have grown in the open inside our dead hedge. You can see this is where Bambi's been in early in the summer. Taken that off, it's taken the leader away, which means that instead of a single long shoot that should be getting on for 6.5 foot tall, so all the way up here, we've got that, which is okay-ish. But when you come back at year 7 and cut these, basically you've got these bits at the bottom, see a branch on it, and the former leader, got to take from there, so all that is cut to waste, and that slows you down, makes the coppice less productive, makes you soak up time, because that's why we cut coppice, and certainly it's why our ancestors cut coppice. because they wanted the small hazel, not the timber. Small hazel is a lot easier to cut, easier to work. What the timber does, you see these are slightly shorter, and these have been left because they were shaded by this chap. This is a sweet chestnut. Imagine the leaves on him, and this is all in dense shade. Start to get out of the dense shade up towards the top of the cant. Cant, also called a coop or a fall or a panel, depending on who you talk to and where they came from and who they talk to, is a name for an area of coppice. So once we get up here, this one got hammered by the deer. It's come back very poorly. The one next door, partly in the dead hedge, got away, and that one, this one's okay. So if I can keep the deer out, this will do all right. And the reason the deer got in, not because they came through this dead hedge, which was fine, they got through this dead hedge, which I built the season previously when I got COVID, so I had to stop early, and they came through from that cant over there, which is 3 years old. In fact, they didn't come from the cant, they came just for the end where this cant overlaps it, and under the bottom of this tree there's a thin piece, a gap, which I've been filling up, and basically they came through here, nibbled some of this because this area got cut late, and they nibbled this. So it doesn't take many deer for very long to do significant damage. This can't be overemphasised enough. Deer were not present in this area of Dorset for centuries. They've only come in the last 50 years perhaps. That's roe coming back in from the West Country, which are the native deer. We've also got seeker deer, of which we have literally hundreds. And they're an introduced species which have been coming in, and they're spreading north into Wiltshire and west into Devon and Somerset. So if we've got all these issues, then why are we still cutting coppice? Why aren't we leaving it to rewild, using the deer and their grazing as a resource to increase the nature conservation value of the habitat as a whole, using them to put in structure? Because coppicing has been done in Britain for over 3,000 years, and always the impetus behind coppice was using the small material, the hazel. In some areas since Roman times, when it was introduced, people have been coppicing, and coppicing very successfully and very lucratively, sweet chestnut. But apart from that chap over there and this one here, and there's some long derelict coppice over the top, there aren't any sweet chestnut here. So it's hazel with oak standards and the occasional non-oak canopy tree. So cutting hazel gets you hazel. The stalls spread out as time goes on, they get bigger diameter, and you see this is almost hollow in the middle. That's basically the response to competition between the stalls on the same shoot to want of light. So the stool tends to be more vigorous on the outside, and over many years, cut and cut and cut again over every 7 years, you end up with a ring. Some of the circumference of that ring dies off, and basically your stool spreads and fragments, and the number of stalls apparently in your area increases with time. This is how coppice was encouraged. Basically people wanted the hazel, they cut the hazel, and they cut everything else at the same time because there was pressure to use things like hawthorn and things like ash that would come up. Ash has a lot of other different uses. Hawthorn is wonderful firewood, and hazel was what came back. So if that's gone on for many hundreds of years on a site like this, this is ancient woodland. It's been woodland and it's been worked since at least 1600, probably before. and I lost my thread. This is the perils of working without any kind of script. Anyway, so the reason we cut hazel and cut coppice, despite all the difficulties, if you're like me, this is what I want. I want the firewood. I'm entirely wood fired. I don't have central heating. So I can get enough firewood to last me one winter, possibly 2 winters, from an area the size of this, from material such as that. And it doesn't matter to me that if I was to sell this premium local markets in small parcels to people wanting top quality firewood, I couldn't pay for my time in the work that I do to cut this. Theoretically, you could increase your productivity by going mechanised, but I don't like mechanisation, certainly in an ancient woodland like this, because it makes a hell of a mess. I prefer to work by hand and to extract by hand. And if you've seen my videos in the past, you'll see how I do it. So, your ancient woodland has evolved over many centuries. Many centuries before that, this is before the run-up to the Industrial Revolution, there would have been other woodlands in the area and hedgerows that would have basically fed species into it. There's continuity with other areas of woodland, continuity of wildlife, including rare species that don't spread very fast, including ancient woodland indicators. Those are plants which are confined to woodlands, and woodlands where the ground has been undisturbed for a long time. They spread very slowly, and they tend to spread along the ground in a site and don't leapfrog from site to site across unsuitable habitat like these fields. And that is not criticising these fields. These fields are very good and very well managed for what they're supposed to do, make cows. So there's a lot of this wildlife has accommodated itself to the management, to the coppicing, and the coppicing has suited that wildlife. Species like the so-called hazel dormouse, which needs dense woodland, dense stands where it can have aerial runways and stay off the ground. And that has a whole lot of different needs for food throughout the year and overwintering needs, etc., which is well supplied by hazel coppice. It looks a bit like that over there. This will get there in about 7 years. There's butterflies, there's other insects, there's the birds that feed on those insects. Over the back there, you've seen the dead hedges. They're excellent small bird nesting habitat. And you won't get those in areas like this, although they will forage up in the tops. So from my point of view, I'm an ecologist. I do coppice for the nature conservation benefits. And the nature conservation benefits are manifold and quite easily explained. It's not just the flowers, it's a whole variety of different species.